I stood outside the supermarket, watching people come and go as I waited for my friend Tom. We were supposed to meet up and grab a few things before heading out to a local park to help set up for a charity event for veterans. Tom was running late, so I decided to grab a cart and head inside. As I walked down the first aisle, I heard a commotion. A woman with a short haircut and an entitled air about her was yelling at a store employee. "I demand to speak to your manager. I can't believe you're allowing these people to beg for money outside your store. It's disrupting my shopping experience." I peered around the corner to see a group of veterans, some in wheelchairs, holding signs and asking for donations. They were all wearing hats and jackets with the insignias of various branches of the military. I felt a pang of sympathy for them and continued down the aisle. I gritted my teeth and continued down the aisle, trying to ignore her. As I turned the corner, I heard a loud crash. The woman had knocked over a display of chips and was now screaming at a store employee who was trying to clean up the mess. "This is all your fault. You should have never allowed those people to stand outside your store." I could feel the rage hitting new milestones within me as I walked up to her. "Excuse me, ma'am. I don't think it's appropriate to treat people that way. Those veterans served our country and deserve our respect." She turned to me, sneering. "You're just as bad as they are. I bet you're one of those snowflakes who wants everything handed to them." I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. I don't think it's productive to argue about this nonsense. These people deserve our respect and gratitude for their service. She rolled her eyes and shoved me again. "I don't have to listen to you. You're just a loser who hangs out with beggars." That was it. I could feel my patience running out. "Ma'am, that's enough. You need to leave this store." She turned to me, incredulous. "What are you going to do about it?" I took out my phone and dialed 911. "I'm calling the police. You're causing a disturbance and need to leave." She snatched my phone out of my hand and threw it across the store. "You can't do that. I have a right to be here." At that moment, 2 police officers walked in. They had been patrolling the area and heard the commotion. "What's going on here?" one of them asked. The woman tried to explain her side of the story, but the officers were having none of it. "Ma'am, you're causing a disturbance. You need to leave this store immediately." She started to argue, but the officers were firm. They handcuffed her and led her out of the store. As she was being taken away, she turned to me with a look of pure hatred. "You're going to regret this." Who was this woman? I quickly finished my shopping and made my way to the park where the charity event was being held. Tom was already there, setting up a booth with other volunteers. I told him about the incident at the store, and he listened with a mixture of shock and admiration. "I can't believe you stood up to her like that. Most people would have just let it go." I shrugged, feeling a bit embarrassed. "I just couldn't stand by and let her treat those veterans that way." Tom patted me on the back. "Well, you did the right thing, and it sounds like she got what she deserved." The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. We helped set up tents, tables, and chairs for the charity event. We helped the veterans with their displays and made sure they had everything they needed. We also raised money by selling T-shirts, wristbands, and other merchandise. As the sun began to set, we all gathered around a small stage for a ceremony honoring the veterans. They were presented with medals, certificates, and other awards. There were speeches, songs, and even a fireworks display. At the end of the night, I was exhausted but happy. We had raised a lot of money for the veterans, and I felt proud to have been a part of it. As we packed up our things and said our goodbyes, I couldn't help but think about the woman from the store. Who was she, and why had she been so angry? I decided to look her up online when I got home, just out of curiosity. And if you ask me, how do I know how to look her up? When the cops were questioning her, the first thing they asked her was her name, and it was loud and clear when she said it right when I was standing there. So I decided to start with that when I got home. To my surprise, I found that she was a well-known local politician who had been in the news for her controversial views on immigration and social justice issues. She had a reputation for being aggressive and confrontational and had even been involved in a few physical altercations with protesters at her rallies. As I read more about her, I felt a sense of vindication. She was the kind of person who thought she could bully her way through life and get away with it, but not this time. I will begin this by saying, from the outside, it seemed like I had everything going for me. A good job, a loving partner, and a cute little apartment in the city. But all of that changed when my entitled mother came back into my life. Let me give you some backstory. My mother had always been a bit of a nightmare. When I was growing up, she would make me feel guilty for everything, from not doing well in school to not calling her enough. It wasn't until I moved out and started my own life that I finally felt free of her clutches. But that all changed a few months ago when she showed up at my doorstep, unannounced and uninvited. I should have known that she had some ulterior motive, but at the time all I felt was guilt and obligation. After all, she was my mother and I hadn't seen her in years, so I let her in, made her some tea, and listened to her ramble on about her life. That's when she dropped the bomb. "I need your help," she said, looking at me with those piercing blue eyes of hers. "I need you to buy me some new clothes." I must have looked at her like she had 3 heads. "What do you mean? Why can't you buy your own clothes?" "Well, I could, but I just thought it would be nice if we could do it together. You know, like a mother and daughter bonding experience." I knew what this was really about. My mother had always been obsessed with her appearance, and she saw me as her personal piggy bank. But I couldn't bring myself to say no, so we went shopping and I bought her a few things that she picked out. I thought that would be the end of it, but I was wrong. A few days later, she called me up again. "Those clothes you bought me were nice, but I think I need more. I want to look my best for my high school reunion next month." I didn't know what to say. I was already struggling to pay my own bills, and here was my mother expecting me to finance her midlife crisis. But again, I couldn't say no. I gave in, and we went shopping again. This became a pattern. Every few days, my mother would call me up, demanding that I take her shopping for more clothes. She was never satisfied with what I bought her, and she always wanted more. I tried to explain to her that I couldn't afford it, but she didn't seem to care. One day, I had finally had enough. My partner and I had just gotten home from a long day at work, and we were settling in to watch a movie. That's when my phone rang. It was my mother, of course. "I need you to take me shopping again," she said. "Not tonight, Mom," I said, trying to keep my cool. "I'm tired and I don't have the money." She let out a huff of annoyance. "Fine, I'll just have to wear the same old clothes to my reunion. I hope you're happy." I hung up the phone, feeling guilty and angry all at once. How had I let this happen? How had I become my mother's personal ATM? I knew I had to do something to put an end to it, but I didn't know what. That's when inspiration struck. I remembered a little trick my grandmother used to play on my mother when she was being particularly difficult. It was petty, but it might just work. The next time my mother called me, demanding that I take her shopping again, I agreed, but this time I had a plan. I took her to a few stores and let her pick out whatever she wanted, but I made sure to steer her towards clothes that were either too small or too large for her. She didn't seem to notice, too caught up in the thrill of shopping. We went back to my apartment and my mother eagerly tried on all of her new clothes. That's when the plan went into action. Every time she put on something that didn't fit, I would make a big show of how good it looked on her, even though it was obviously too tight or too loose. "Oh, Mom, that shirt is perfect on you," I exclaimed as she struggled to breathe in a top that was at least 2 sizes too small. "You look so slim and chic." She preened in front of the mirror, completely oblivious to the fact that the clothes were cutting off her circulation. I couldn't help but feel a little bit of satisfaction. Maybe this would teach her a lesson. But my satisfaction was short-lived. My mother's excitement turned to frustration as she realized that none of the clothes actually fit her properly. "What is wrong with these clothes?" she snapped, throwing a pair of pants across the room. "Are you trying to make me look fat?" I took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "No, Mom, I'm not trying to make you look fat. I just think that these clothes are the wrong size for you." She glared at me. "Well, I don't appreciate you wasting my time and money on clothes that don't fit. I want to go back to the store and exchange them for something that actually fits me." I knew then that my plan had failed. My mother was as entitled as ever, and she wasn't going to let a little thing like ill-fitting clothes stop her from getting what she wanted, but I wasn't about to give up. I had one more trick up my sleeve. The next day, I took my mother to a different store, one that I knew had a strict no-return policy. I let her pick out whatever she wanted, but this time I made sure that everything was the wrong size. When we got to the register, my mother was practically vibrating with excitement, eager to show off her new wardrobe to her friends. But the sales clerk had other ideas. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we don't accept returns on clothing," she said, looking pointedly at the pile of clothes on the counter. My mother wasn't having it. "What do you mean you don't accept returns? Where's your manager?" The manager came over, and my mother launched into a tirade about how she had been duped into buying clothes that didn't fit her, but the manager stood firm. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but our policy is very clear. We don't accept returns on clothing." My mother stormed out of the store fuming. Maybe now she would understand that she couldn't always get what she wanted just because she thought she deserved it. Of course, that wasn't the end of the story. My mother continued to make demands on my time and money, and I continued to struggle with guilt and obligation. But at least I knew that I had stood up to her once, and that was a start. Maybe someday I would find the courage to do it again. I don't know if this story fits here, but here we go anyway. I was just minding my own business, doing some grocery shopping at the local store when I encountered the most entitled person I have ever met. This entitled person, let's call her Karen, was causing a commotion at the checkout counter, and I knew that I was about to witness something truly ridiculous. At first, I thought Karen was just having trouble with her card, but it quickly became apparent that she was trying to pay with an empty card. She was swiping it over and over again, even though it kept getting declined. "Try again," Karen said. The cashier, a young girl who looked like she was about to burst into tears, was trying her best to explain to Karen that the card had been declined, but Karen was having none of it. "This is ridiculous! How dare you tell me that the card is empty?" "I demand to speak to your manager," Karen exclaimed, her voice dripping with entitlement. I rolled my eyes and sighed, knowing that this was going to be a long and frustrating ordeal. I was in a hurry, and this wild Karen is making everything difficult. As the manager arrived, Karen began to escalate the situation, demanding that they accept her empty card and threatening to call the police if they didn't. It was clear that Karen had never heard the phrase, "You can't get blood from a stone." I decided not to be a stone and intervene, hoping to de-escalate the situation before things got out of hand. "Excuse me, ma'am," I said, trying to sound polite. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. It sounds like you're having trouble with your card." Karen turned to me, her eyes narrowed in suspicion. "And who are you?" she asked, clearly annoyed that I had interrupted her tirade. "I'm just a fellow shopper, but I couldn't help but notice that you're trying to pay with an empty card." "Maybe I can help," Karen scoffed. "I don't need your help. This is the store's problem, not mine and clearly not yours." "Well, I'm not sure what the store can do for you if your card is empty," I said, trying to keep my sarcasm in check. "Please, if you would, I'm in a hurry, and your card is getting declined. Try to put some money in it and come back again. This may help." Karen bristled at my comment. "How dare you? I don't have to take this from a nobody like you." She then turned back to the manager. "Are you going to let this man talk to me like that?" The manager looked uncomfortable but said nothing. Karen's temper was getting the best of her. She pulled another card and said, "Try this one." It was declined. Again, she began to throw her empty cards at the cashier, causing a scene. I could see the fear in the cashier's eyes as she tried to avoid the card flying towards her face. Karen was now screaming and causing a commotion. The manager finally called for security to escort her out. "That's it, ma'am. You need to leave the store if you're going to now," the big security guy said firmly. Karen shoved the security guy as he was showing her the way out, saying, "I will never shop here anyway, you bunch of a-holes who don't know how to treat customers." As she was being escorted out of the store, Karen turned to me, pointing her finger. "This is all your fault. You should have minded your own business." I couldn't help but roll my eyes. Sorry for trying to help, Karen. Maybe you should consider getting a job so that you can actually pay for your grocery. With that, Karen was escorted out of the store, and I could see the relief on the cashier's face. I paid for my groceries, said goodbye to the manager, and left the store. As I walked out, I could hear Karen still yelling outside the store, causing a scene in the parking lot. With a smirk on my face, I said, "Hey, you dropped this empty card inside." Karen was beyond livid. She came to me running. At this point, I didn't actually know what to do. I'm not the type who can get into fights, so I ran to my car while laughing and storming out of the parking lot. The world is full of entitled Karens, but broke Karen is the worst.